Hi everyone, it's Marianne. Welcome to my wasteless life. In this video, I'll be talking about the Monstera Adansonii. Thank you so much for joining me today, and if you're new, this is my wasteless life where I take you along my plant and sustainable lifestyle journey and share with you some of my tips and tricks along the way. And for today's video, we'll be talking about the Monstera Adansonii. And if you don't know yet, this month I'm doing a Monstera series, and I previously released a video on the popular Monstera varieties and what I currently have in my collection. And every Thursday this month, I'll be putting out a specific care and propagation video for the Monstera plants that I have in my collection, and starting with the Monstera Adansonii. But how do you pronounce Monstera Adansonii? Is it Adansonii, Adansonii, or Adansonii? I just go with Adansonii, but let me know down in the comments, how do you pronounce Monstera Adansonii? So nowadays, if you go to a garden center, nursery, or plant shop, you can easily find a Monstera Adansonii, and you might even find different varieties or forms of it. But a couple of years ago, they were actually pretty hard to find, and they were very coveted plants. And I was able to get a 4-inch Monstera Adansonii when I was in New York City and found one in a plant shop in Chinatown called Dahing Plants. And because it's Chinatown, you can haggle. I was able to get the Monstera Adansonii for $5 in a 4-inch pot, but it was actually just a cutting with about a couple of leaves. And when I was paying for the plant, I saw that she had some cuttings propagating, and she sold one to me for an additional $3. So back then, I thought it was a steal to get cuttings of the Monstera Adansonii for $8 total. So after the Monstera deliciosa, Monstera Adansonii is the next popular Monstera plant, the one that a lot of people know about. And when I first got my Monstera Adansonii, I actually didn't realize that I had two forms of it, the wide form and the narrow form. But back then I couldn't really tell the difference because I was struggling so much with the Monstera Adansonii plant that I had. It was constantly yellowing and it wouldn't produce more than 4 leaves at a time. I don't think I ever experienced root rot with the Monstera Adansonii, which is what was puzzling me. I couldn't figure out why it was yellowing since there was no root rot issues. I was giving it enough light and I was watering it on time. It wasn't actually until this year that I was able to finally grow my Monstera Adansonii into this tall, beautiful plant. And this one actually just staked up last night, and I have the narrow form currently hanging right here behind me. And a couple weeks back, I did post a reel on my Monstera Adansonii, and I did get DMs on how they can get their Monstera Adansonii to look like mine and to also help them troubleshoot the issues that we're having with their Monstera Adansonii, and mainly it was the yellowing. So in this video, I'm going to tell you how I was able to troubleshoot that yellowing and how I was able to let my Monstera Adansonii grow this big. Unlike POTHOS plants, the Monstera Adansonii are not low light plants. They prefer to have medium to bright indirect light. When both of my Monstera Adansonii were a lot smaller, I did have them in my IKEA greenhouse cabinet and they were under a grow light. When they became too big for the IKEA greenhouse cabinet, I put this one next to a south-facing window and then a west-facing window, and I did have the Monstera Adansonii also at the same window, but it was wrapped around the curtain rod, so it wasn't really getting directly hit by the light. I would say giving it moderate light or medium light is enough for the Monstera Adansonii. I would be very careful with giving it bright light because it causes burning of the leaves. It has a lot of holes in it, so it doesn't really have a lot of surface area to be able to absorb all those light. When it comes to watering the Monstera Adansonii, this would depend on how much light you give it. If we're giving it bright light, then you probably have to water it a lot more frequently than if you were just giving it medium light. But one thing is sure about the Monstera Adansonii when it comes to watering is it loves consistency. If you're very inconsistent with its watering, that's when the yellowing starts. I'm not a huge fan of LECA, but when it comes to my Monstera plants, a lot of them do really well in LECA, and that includes my Monstera Adansonii. And I do believe me switching it to LECA is what helped it thrive and grow to what it is now. Of course, LECA is not a solution to all. I still do experience yellowing, but it's not as bad as it used to be, and I still have continued growth. And as you can see with my Monstera Adansonii narrow form, there is some yellow leaves on this one. So this could be one of two things. These are just old leaves that are dying out, which kind of makes sense. Or second, I did put a new type of nutrient water. Actually, it's not even proper nutrient water. It's organic fertilizer that I diluted and used it as nutrient water for this one. So it might be a reaction to that. So the main reason this would produce yellowing leaves is the same with my Monstera Adansonii wide form. It is because that I let the LECA dry out for way too long and I forgot to refill the water. So in my experience, as long as I am not letting the LECA dry out and I'm giving it a flush every now and then, I wouldn't have problems with yellowing leaves or not having any growth in my Monstera Adansonii. Okay, so right now we're in my bathroom and I'm gonna give this Monstera Adansonii a flush. And as you can see, there's very little water in there, so that is not good. I do find that this Monstera Adansonii narrow form drinks a lot of water. I usually have to change the water twice a week as opposed to my other plants in LECA that I do it once a week, sometimes not even. So I'm just gonna take out all the dried and dead leaves. So this is why I'm not so worried, because this is like pretty much a browning leaf. So I suspect it's just like really old leaves that were on their way out. But here's what I'm going to do. Put it in the sink. Just run tap water in it. Some people prefer to use distilled water when it comes to their plants in LECA. I don't really care. My plants don't really care. But my tap water is a pH 7 though, so I think that makes a difference. Other people have much harder water, so I think that's why they opt for distilled or filtered water, but in my case, I can get away with not using one. Okay, so that's what pretty much flushing entails, just washing the LECA and everything. And then this, there you go. This is the temporary nutrient water that I'm using with my plants in LECA. So this is the organic fertilizer, Perky Plants, but the succulent formula, because that one has the lowest NPK ratio. And move you here. And I just fill about like a third way through. With this one though, I try to put a little bit more because like I said, it drinks up its water pretty quickly. So I'm not worried about it sitting in water for too long. But yeah, so that's how I flush my Monstera Adansonii in LECA. But if you're someone who doesn't want to convert your Monstera Adansonii into LECA, would your Monstera Adansonii still thrive in a different growing medium? Of course it would. A lot of people grow their Monstera Adansonii in soil and other soilless mediums like coco coir, sphagnum moss, ponds, perlite, etc. I do think the most important thing to keep in mind with your Monstera Adansonii is your consistency when it comes to its watering, whatever medium you're growing it in, and also in accordance to the amount of light that you're giving it. So when Monstera Adansonii is suffering from scales again, I initially thought it was just like, old leaf yellowing, and I also forgot to refill its water the other day, so I just thought it's regular yellowing. But upon further inspection, it looks like it's suffering from scales again, so I have to do another treatment, which kind of sucks, but we had worse. As you can see, this leaf, although it looks like a variegated Monstera Adansonii mint right now, or a Monstera Adansonii aurea, it's actually just a sick leaf. And as you can see, those are the scales in between the midribs and the petiole. That's where you usually find them, and especially on the underside of the leaves. So do take the time to inspect your plants. And I do find my Monstera Adansonii very prone to scales compared to any of my other plants. All you really need is isopropyl alcohol or hydrogen peroxide and some cotton buds. And the only way around it is to pick them off one by one. Yeah, that's really the only thing that you could do. Spraying them with neem oil spray, which I have done. This is the second time that I've sprayed them. It doesn't do it. The scales will still be there because they're very attached to the leaves. So very important that you also check in between the petiole, because that's where they love to hide. So I removed this leaf because this one is pretty much a goner, but I don't know if you can see in between the petiole. Look how many scales are in between it. You don't really want to let it get to this point because often it's already too late. And you just have to get rid of the leaf and hope that the other leaves are not infected. When it comes to propagating the Monstera Adansonii, I have only propagated them to rehab them, not to propagate for the sake of making more plants. So that's the reason why I have my narrow form trailing so long and my wide form growing so tall. I'm not gonna make any cuttings on my wide form because I'm trying to get it to grow as tall as possible. But we can make cuttings from our narrow form. This one is pretty much just like propagating pothos plants. And I actually cut the tips off this recently just because it had runners, and that's the only time I prune this plant. Otherwise, I just let it grow. I can make cuttings from this one because the internodes are getting too long, so I'm just gonna cut in the middle. And make another cutting with this one. Okay, so I'm not gonna make much cuttings. I'm just making two just for demonstration purposes. But as you can see, the internodes in this one was getting long. That's why I cut it off. But with this one, I'm just gonna cut it off a little bit on the top. This one, I could leave it a little bit longer because I am water propagating this. So it would need something to help it anchor inside the test tube. So with this one, I'm pretty much just plopping it in here. And there you go. It's propagating. A couple of other things to keep in mind about the Monstera Adansonii. It is a tropical plant, so it hates sudden drops in temperature. As of filming this video, we are transitioning from summer into fall into winter in the northern hemisphere, so do watch out for those sudden drops in temperature as we head into the colder season. Sudden drops in temperature and lesser humidity would be another reason why your Monstera Adansonii would have yellowing leaves. So as we head to the colder season, make sure your Monstera Adansonii is not close to a window or somewhere that it would receive a cold draft. And as you start to use your heater as well, make sure this is not underneath a vent, and if you can, use a humidifier to give it increased humidity. And those are my care tips for the Monstera Adansonii. If you have any questions, please let me know down in the comments. Or if you have any additional tips and tricks that I didn't mention in this video, please also share them down in the comments as well. We would love to read it. And again, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you're new here, please do subscribe. I come up with videos every week. And if you haven't yet, go check out these videos up here until my next one. But until then, I see you, I appreciate you, take care of yourself and each other, and have a plentiful day. Bye!